Hi, my name is Stacy Maurier, and I'm the founding lawyer of Estate Connection Law Office in St. Albert, Alberta. Over 50% of Canadians haven't written a will. And while we're all guaranteed to die, sometimes we deal with estates where there's just been no will written. So, what happens in those situations? Well, in those situations in Alberta, you're considered to have died intestate, which just is a fancy word that says you've died without a will. And if you haven't written a will, then the government of Alberta has actually written one for you, and it outlines who gets your money. So, in some cases, it doesn't really matter. For instance, if you are in a first marriage and you have no children, everything goes to your spouse. If you're in a first marriage and the children that you have are with your spouse, well, everything goes to your spouse. If you're in a second relationship, it gets a little bit more complicated. And your second spouse would be getting the first 150,000 or 50% of your estate, and the kids get the rest. And there can be various versions from there. So there's a whole diorama of what occurs if something should happen to you and you haven't bothered to write a will. Same thing goes for who would be handling your estate. In Alberta, we call those a personal representative instead of an executor. And the government of Alberta has outlined who would be your personal representative. So if something happens to you, it would be your spouse if you only have a spouse. If you have a spouse and children, and those children are the children of your spouse, then it'll be your spouse. If you're in a second relationship, well, it'll be your spouse. And it just goes on and on from there. One of the biggest problems we see when people haven't written their will is A, they don't have guardian for their children. And B, if their children end up inheriting any money, well, they'll give it on their 18th birthday, and that may or may not be what you want. For those reasons, we strongly recommend that you write your will, and that way you're in control of the situation. I was once contacted about a heartbreaking situation, but unfortunately, there was nothing we could do. A gentleman had passed away. His dad had passed away just a couple weeks before him, and he had a sizable estate. When he was born, this gentleman, his mom walked out, and he hadn't seen his mom. Well, not that he'd ever recall, but since he was a couple days old. And because his mom was deemed to be the sole survivor, she inherited everything, even though she had walked out and never really knew her son. You can imagine his brothers and sisters were outraged that this woman, who caused them a lot of pain, was now not only going to receive 100% of the estate, just because of the rules in the province of Alberta, but also was going to be the executor. And there was nothing we could do. Don't let this happen to your family. Take the time, take control, and write your will today. It's a simple document that will give your family a lot of peace of mind if something should happen to you. Questions or concerns? Contact Estate Connection Law Office. We're here to help.